Hello and welcome to week 3 of the Momtrepreneur Mastery class. Again, this week we are talking about the financial systems, putting our finances in place to help get us ahead, right? And right now we are going to get started on lesson 2, Finance 101, our personal finances and business accounting. And we are talking about part 3 today, your personal finances, the B word, the dreaded B word, right? So last lesson, I shared a little bit of that with you. So the B word, of course, is our budget, but we ended the last part of our lesson talking about our debt snowball. And before we get any further, I want to explain what your debt snowball is. So on that second tab of our Excel spreadsheet, our debt snowball tab, we already listed all of our debts from least to greatest, right? And I told you there was a reason why we did that. And there's a really good reason. And that's because we want to work on paying off our debts, starting with the smallest one because it gives us the easy wins, right? We want these easy wins because these easy wins create satisfaction that make our desire to continue paying down our debts a habit. So when you try to pay off a higher debt first, just maybe because it has a higher interest rate, it takes you longer and it becomes discouraging. So it's easier to fall off track. By paying off the smaller debts first, this also allows us to create what we call the snowball effect. So let me go ahead and share my screen because I want to give you guys that visual of what that snowball is, right? So we're starting at the top with our snowball. And as a snowball rolls, it gains that momentum and it adds more snow to it, right? So this is the idea. We're going to start with that smallest debt first. And we're going to work our absolute hardest at paying it off. And then once that's paid off, we're going to take that money, that monthly payment that we would usually make towards that debt, and we're going to add it to our monthly payment for our next debt. And we're going to work hard to pay off that debt and keep working hard until that's paid off. And again, take that total monthly sum that we would pay towards that debt and add it to our next debt, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, we're gaining the momentum here. Right? But as we had set up on our debts tab, paying these debts off by their minimum amounts is not ideal. Throwing as much as possible towards our debts just to pay them off is what we really want to strive for. But the question is, how much extra do we have to throw towards these debts? And the best way that we can determine that is, drum roll please, with a budget, right? So if you have your $1,000 emergency fund fully funded, the next thing that you want to do is create that dreaded B word. We need to create a budget. But really quick though, let me share my personal feelings with you towards the budget. When I first started, I felt like it just took too much time. It was hard. It was restraining. I felt like I was out of control, like I was losing control. So I didn't really do it. Like I mentioned, I was on the Dave Ramsey-ish plan, right? My budget did consist though of moving all of the money for bills and sinking funds over to what I called our expense account. It was just a separate account. And whatever was left in our main banking account, that was for food, groceries, gas, entertainment, whatever else we wanted pretty much. And so of course I and my husband, we spent it, right? And we rarely had leftover money. But in my brain, I was doing the right thing. I was budgeting because all of our bills were being paid. We were funding many of our desired sinking funds account, like Christmas and that type of thing. But in reality, I really wasn't budgeting, guys. Unless we tell our money where to go, it will go wherever the hell it wants, right? It's really, really easy to do one-click purchases right now with the fingerprint. So we really, really, really need to be careful. We have to set up this budget because unless we tell our money where to go, it's going to go all willy-nilly, right? So contrary to my beliefs or what I had initially thought a budget was or did, a budget actually does give you control over your money. It gives you the control. It keeps you from living above your means, right? It keeps you from bleeding out essentially. And it allows us to see if and where extra money can be allocated. So this is exactly what we want to do when it comes to paying off our debts. So in retrospect, here's what I actually realized in terms of Dave Ramsey's plan. I realized that I simply got confused. And what does a confused mind say? A confused mind always says no. So my brain just shut this down. So the question is, how do you create and start a budget if you've never done one before? That was like the hardest part for me. And nobody held my hand and really walked me through how to start when you've never done it. He shows you how to do it, but how to start when you've never done it before. So once again, we need to start where we are. And once I did this, it was mind-blowing, right? So we're gonna do, this isn't so much of an exercise, but more of a realization of where you are now. So there's two ways to do this. Number one, I either want you to download or type out 3 months worth of your other expenses in a separate Excel spreadsheet. So by other expenses, I mean anything outside of what we have already accounted for. So things outside of your normal bills, your regular bills, your debt payments, and any of your sinking funds. So this will be things like food, groceries, buying toiletries, gas, other shopping, etc. The alternative to going back and taking 3 months of the past is to start today and begin tracking this for the next few months. Either way, once you have at least 2 to 3 months worth of these other expenses recorded, I want you to categorize them, right? So I want you to categorize them, and I'm going to share with you these other categories. So other expense categories include food, restaurants, eating out. It includes groceries or toiletry shopping, gas or auto, like if you have to get oil or something like that. Health, which can include dental, vision, anything like that. Your business, if you are not separating it yet, and any other spending or any other expenses that go out. Again, usually those are such a small portion, so we're gonna just lump them under other, okay? All right, so remember, we've already accounted for our debt, our bills, our sinking funds, so this time we're just concerned about these other expense categories. Now, once you have all of these categories, I want you to go ahead and sort and total each category. And I want you to take the average over the number of months you entered. So if you did 3 months, you'll divide that total by 3. If you did 2 months, divide it by 2. And this is where we're gonna start, right? This is our starting point. If you're anything like how I was, this might be a little bit of a sucker punch to the gut, right? You're like, I spent how much on food? Yeah. So what we're gonna do is we are going to take a quick temperature check again. So this is our second temperature check, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the total average of all of our other expenses, right? So we came up with an average for each of these categories. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna add up all of those averages. So the total of all of those averages. And we're gonna divide that by our total income. So go back to your income tab, divide by the total income, and multiply that by 100 to get our percentage, okay? If your percentage is greater than 30, so if you are greater than 30%, again, that red flag needs to start waving, okay? Because again, our other totals are at around 65%, right? So we cannot be greater than 30% here. If you are in the red zone and need to do some real quick tightening of the belt, right? Now, when I first did these computations, like I said, you might feel pretty sick to your stomach. I was way, way, way in the red zone. But it's okay. Remember, the simple fact that you're even doing this means that you're headed in the right direction. So we're ready to start our budget now. And what we're going to do is we are going to create what we call a zero-based budget. But guys, before we do that, I want to share with you something. I want to share with you the fact that there is no such thing as a bad economy, right? Everybody blames their circumstances on what is out there, okay? So we are like, well, I'm in this position because it's a bad economy. Guys, I did this in 2008 when the economy was at its lowest point in the last like 50 years, right? there is no such thing as a bad economy. There's also no such thing as a good economy. There is an internal economy and there is an external economy, right? The internal economy is what we are sharing here today, because you have to understand that it is us. We make our own weather. Your internal economy is you and your finances, right? The external economy is the world outside and its finances. Thinking that there are good and bad economies is a victim mentality. You are saying that you are reliant on the outside world. What you do is reliant on what happens out there. But the truth is, if you get yourself in a position of financial peace, you do the things that we shared here today, your budget, you pay off debt, you fully fund your emergency account, you fund your sinking funds account. When the outside world sees a bad economy, this becomes a prime opportunity for you to invest and grow, right? Some of the best investments that I've made came from bad economies because it was my opportunity to invest. While everybody else was going crazy, it's your opportunity. So don't take on that victim's mentality. Create your budget and go from there. So again, we're starting here. We're starting with this zero-based budget. A zero-based budget tells every single one of our dollars where to go, right? If we're not telling it where to go, it's going to go wherever it wants to go. So a zero-based budget tells every single one of our dollars where to go. And we're going to do this using all of the numbers that we've come up with so far, our starting point, right? So let's start on that next tab, the budget tab. So let me switch over to my Excel spreadsheet here. And our last thing was on the regular expenses. So now we're going to switch over to that budget tab, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to go back to each of these tabs and you're going to write down those total monthly numbers. So I'm just going to flub some numbers here really quick. So let's say like my total household income, because I'm accounting for myself and my husband, let's say is $6,000, not 60. Woo. Let's say our regular expenses each month are $2,500. Let's say our sinking funds are, I think we had said like 100, right? Putting $100 a month. Let's say our debt payments are pretty big. And then we're going to use that little exercise that we did, the 3 months or 2 months worth of expenses. We categorized them and we took the averages, right? So we're going to take those averages that we came up with and we're going to put them in here. So let's say we spend $500 on food, $500 on grocery, $500 on gas. I mean, I'm just playing with this here. And that's exactly what this is here for you to do, just to throw those numbers in and we're going to see where we land, right? Let's say we have a pretty heavy health bill that we have to take care of. And then our Amazon, crazy spending is out there. So all of our other expenses are $950. So what we're left with is we're left in the positive, $50. Now, maybe this looks different for you. And maybe you ended up with something like that where you're in the negative, right? So no matter where you ended up, this is what we want to talk about. We want to talk about what happened. Where did you end up? If your total is negative, again, we're in the red zone and we have some really quick cleanup work that we have to do. But if right now, without any changes, you're at zero or pretty close to it, that's a good thing. But also worthy of a bit of cleanup to allow us a little bit of wiggle room. If you landed in the positive, it's amazing. So now what you have is a little bit of wiggle room to work with. And you can begin allocating money, which is what we want to do. So if you're in the negative, you need to start trimming the fat. Where can you begin to cut back? Look at your numbers and start playing around with them. Trim some of them back. Do you see an excess of spending in the food category? How much can you realistically scale that back? If you are really far back in the negative like I was, you might have to get a bit more serious, like cutting out things like cable, cutting back on your phone bill, and so forth. Like we had mentioned before, once you have your $1,000 emergency fund saved up, baby step number 2 is to start paying off debt. So our goal here is to find that slight bit of wiggle room to allow us to put a little more extra towards our debts and allow us to fully fund our sinking accounts, right? So continue to play with this until you reach 0. And if you become slightly in the positive, move that positive amount over to your debts and keep yourself at 0. If you are at or close to 0 already, are there any areas of other spending that you maybe can trim from? And again, trim where you can and then move that extra money over to your debts. If you are in the positive, again, great. Take that excess positive amount and move it over towards your debts. Ladies, by doing this, congratulations. You have now completed your budget. And this, my friends, is actually what I like to call the big 8, to be honest. If you simply track these 8 categories every month and keep your thumb on them, you will keep the pulse of your entire financial system. Now, there are a few different ways that you can go about this, because now you set your budget, right? But now you have to keep up with it. So how do you stick to your budget? So there's a couple different ways again. So the first way that you could do it is a cash-only system or a cash-based system. Immediately pull that money out from the bank and put it in envelopes for weekly spending, right? And spend only from the designated categories of those envelopes. The other option is if you're like me and you pretty much make all of your purchases online or by card, keep only those designated amounts in the bank account. Move everything else out to a separate account and spend from there. And keep a very strict eye on never going over budget. Overdrafting is like stealing from the bank, guys. Do not do it. You would not take a gun and go rob a bank. Do not overdraft your bank account. Don't go over budget. Now, hold yourself to this budget, right? Keep at this every single month. Remember, each month is different. So check your budget before the month starts and be aware of things that come under the radar. Things like back to school shopping, special events, trips where you have to spend a little extra money. These might change your spending in certain categories on a month-to-month basis. So keep an eye out for these. Be proactive rather than reactive. Adjust your spending accounts before the month starts and revisit your budget regularly, especially as your debts get paid off or changes to your income occur, right? This has to become a habit. So find ways to make your budget obvious. This is easy to do when using the cash-based system because the cash is either there or it's not, right? But how can you do this when you're simply using your bank account? Some banks offer like notifications when you drip below a certain level. Another option is creating like a sign or a poster in your house using a dry erase board for this is awesome. Put it on your fridge, bathroom mirror, wherever you're going to see it. And most importantly, keep it updated regularly, right? Again, in making habits, we make it obvious, we make it attractive, we make it easy, and we make it satisfying. So let's make it attractive. What can you do to make this attractive or more appealing to you? Make a date out of it, right? Either by yourself or with your significant other. Enjoy some drinks, have some lunch or dinner. Make it something you will look forward to, right? Again, open up this money conversation. It is nothing to be scary about. This should be fun. Next, make it easy. Don't overcomplicate things by trying to expand or add too many categories. Keep it simple. Go off of the big 8. You don't need to expand that other category. Keep it in one simple Excel spreadsheet. And last but not least, make it satisfying. Consider adding a sinking fund account for yourself for something very specific and special. Label it for that thing, like a trip to a fancy spa or a new pair of shoes or whatever excites you. And every time you stay on budget, reward yourself by putting X amount of dollars in that account. So let's say every time you stay on budget, have $20 accounted for in your budget, or 25 or 100, however much. And if you stay on budget, you get to take that money and put it into that sinking funds account. Now, if you're doing this with your spouse, as long as both of you guys stay on budget, then you can do that, right? Your assignment, and your only assignment right now, is to review this budget and set up your implementation intention for your next budget date. So remember, our implementation intention looked like I will behavior at time and location, right? So I will review my budget at a budget date night at 6:30 on Friday at Starbucks, right? I don't know, whatever the case is. So what's next? So you created a budget, you made it a habit, you stuck with it, you adjusted and allocated as you went along, you've paid off all your debts. Now you can move on to baby step number 3, right? Fully funding your emergency account with 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. Guys, if your family was affected by this pandemic in any way, by loss of wages, loss of a job, whatever it is, you, I'm sure, see how clearly and important this is, right? Thankfully, and gratefully, my husband and I were not affected financially by this pandemic. I mean, I know we were all affected in many different ways, but financially we were not. However, I will share something with you guys. Last year in November, my husband had a switch of assignment at his work, and a hiccup, how this happens, I don't know, but a hiccup occurred in the HR department and cut him off from getting paid for 3 months. Like at first we thought, okay, next pay period. He gets paid every 2 weeks. Okay, next pay period. And I mean, he was in his HR office like every single day, but 3 months, guys. For 3 months, it was only my income coming in. And when you are working together and you're doing your budget, like both of your incomes matter. And yes, you know, thank you to the county for this, but if this would have come at any other time in our lives, I will be the first to admit that we would not have been, we could not have survived this. We would have been royally screwed. We both contribute to our monthly household income. So if you can imagine, things like this happen, guys. They do. Like, who could have ever predicted this? But regardless, we were okay. Even in the middle of a $20,000 bathroom remodel, we completely gutted and remodeled 2 of our bathrooms in our house. Even with Christmas around the corner, guys, this happened in November. Even 6 months pregnant with a baby on the way, this happened this past year, guys. We knew we were fine for at least 3 to 6 months anyway, because we had our 3 to 6 month emergency fund fully funded, right? So what happens when an emergency like this does occur? You use the money. That's what it's there for. And we used it. We cut back a lot, but we used it. But as soon as that emergency passes, you go right back to that baby step and you start over and continue with your baby steps until you're done. And I highly, highly encourage you to do so. But we'll save those conversations for another class. For the sake of this class and this lesson, I want to shift our gears. So we've done all these things, right? We've found ourselves in a sound personal financial situation now. How do we mirror this over to our business? We are actually going to take a quick break here, and we will continue this in lesson 2, part 4. But I want you guys to start looking at how this might be able to be reflected. Think about your personal finances and everything that we discussed. How can this possibly be reflected over to your business account? All right, guys, I want to thank you guys so much again for being here with me. We'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.